Welcome to Short Course, episode 131 for June 28th, 2024. I'm your host, Ben Barry. One of the things that has been a topic of discussion online recently that I think is pretty fair is that the board has changed. We've been promising change, this being the board of USPSA, of course, and there doesn't seem to be much actually changing, much visibly changing. And so I wanted to address a few things that have been brought up, as well as talk to the degree that I can about what is either public or reasonably non-specific enough that it's not an issue to discuss at this point, and try and give everyone out there who wants to believe that there is still hope and that this board is working and making headway, albeit not at the pace some people would wish, give some reason to be optimistic. So one of the things that I've seen mentioned is the idea that our most recent board meeting on June 17th was mostly executive session. And that's just it's a true statement. It was. The reason for that, though, is that most of the executive session was going over the May financials, which we had received, and I'll come back to that in a minute, and the Carrier Optics Nationals budget, which is still in progress. So both what was budgeted in the budget that we did vote to approve, as well as what is unfolding as the match is progressing, and things that either were budgeted for but slightly incorrectly or were not budgeted for, as those things are being adjusted up and down in some cases. So I think it would be nice if we had all those numbers confidently locked down to the point where we could just talk about them openly. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about the historical transactions. And so as a board, we're not there yet, but the goal is to be as transparent as we can be, particularly once we have a sense of what the final numbers were, not necessarily the down to the penny, every single person or every single vendor, what they were paid, but to the penny, this is what we spent, this is what we took in, here's how much we made or lost on each match. I certainly will advocate for, once we have that data, being able to report on what we know actually happened. A lot of these budgets and a lot of the historical financial information is based on coding of dubious quality or recording of dubious quality. And so we are trying not to make too many commitments based on input information that we're not fully confident in yet. That said, as I mentioned on last week's podcast, the amount of data that we are getting as a board that we got in June. So on June 12th, we got the final May numbers, which was pretty impressive, and doubly so that it included budget versus actuals for every single budget item in our budget, which the spreadsheet is about 85 lines. Some of those are roll up or title lines. So, call it 60, 65 actual separate budget categories that we're breaking down. We have a budget for, as well as we are actually tracking expenses for that. And so that gives us the data to start asking questions, to start saying, both in a certain month, something may have been over the monthly budget, or also in the 5 months so far, we had budgeted a certain amount, and across those 5 months, in each month, the costs weren't maybe quite on budget. Some were above, some were below, but over those 5 months, we are that line item is on budget, that sort of thing. And so that's giving us the information to actually start navigating, start having discussions, start making decisions, start planning. And so, again, that's not something that's public, but it is substantial and hard to understate. And I will say, I've also seen some discussion about the fact that in the past, the USPSA has had a number of different accountants, including, I believe, last year or maybe the year before, there was some kind of arrangement for a part-time CFO. That arrangement ended. I don't know. That was all before my time on the board. I don't know anything about what that happened or why, but what I can say is the contractor the contract accountant that we are using now seems very competent. He has good answers for our questions. The data that he delivers is well formatted, well packaged, very concise, and seems like he's happy working with us. So for all of these rumors about USPSA being toxic and running off every organization that we work with, that does not appear to be the current state of things. I can't speak about anything before my time on the board. I don't know how those relationships unfolded, but with at least in this relationship, things seem to be a win-win. So I foresee this continuing to be a productive and mutually beneficial relationship. And while we're on the topic of finances, I also wanted to address some discussion that I've seen online around the budget summary that we put out as a board. So when we voted to approve the full down to the penny forecast budget for each of these budget categories, the decision was made as a board that we would put out a summary. And the process of generating that summary was to basically roll up certain things that are separate line items in our budget. So for example, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year memberships, that was just rolled up into a single line item. And then to round those numbers to the nearest $1,000. And that gives the budget summary a sort of low resolution impression that it's something that we just sort of scribbled out and made up numbers. But that's not the case. The numbers were forecast as best we could, but then the summary was condensed down from that. So what you're seeing there is not the budget that we're operating on, but it is a sort of one-step abstraction, both in some of the budget items, like I said, just breaking down some of the smaller categories, just rolling those up into higher level categories, and then just rounding the numbers. But that's purely a presentation thing. Now, that said, the budget, when it was drafted to be relatively conservative. So, for example, the activity fees in 2022, if you go and look at the actual posted financial statement on uspsa.org/finances, which the 2023 statement is coming, it is in process. It should be here in the next few weeks. So we just have to do all the final approvals and as a board look at it and vote to approve it. But it is coming. It'll be posted as soon as we can. But if you look at the 2022 activity fees, that number was $625,000. And for 2024, not knowing what things would be like with the protests, the forecast for 2024 was $525,000. So $100,000 less forecast in the interest of being conservative and realistic. So this was not just a take every number from last year and tack on 5% type budget. There were actually some conservative estimates made, and there was some discussion I saw around the fact that the budget was basically up at the top, and then the last line item was nationals expenses will be a $300,000 loss, basically $100,000 per nationals for the 3 nationals that USPSA puts on. That was just done because those 3 nationals are tracked in their own separate budgets. So they are forecast to lose a certain amount of money, and that number was conservatively rounded up to $100,000 per nationals. And that was on that budget, that was the last line item. But then right after that, there was a projection of a $100,000 surplus. Now, I think we are still early enough in the process of really refining our accounting to be able to take that $100,000 number to the bank, so to speak. But it was not plucked out of thin air. It was not just something scribbled down to make the numbers work so we didn't have to approve a deficit budget. It was the best budget reasonably possible, drafted by some of the board members working with the managing director at the time to put something on paper that we could approve and use as our guide. And now we are going forward using that as the guide and looking at where we're off and making course corrections before the year is over. The board has also worked together to draft a statement to be released at the Optics Nationals members meeting, and also posted online for folks who aren't there to see. That will just be based on the numbers we're seeing, a sort of high level update of what the financial picture looks like, but without going into too much detail, that'll be that'll be clarified a bit there. The numbers are currently positive. Now, nationals hasn't happened yet. We still have the rest of the year to get through, but we are not looking at a position where we're staring down the barrel of another $300,000 loss year and just sticking our head in the sand and not doing anything about it. We are actively working on understanding the finances and controlling spending and making sure that we are not burning more of our cash reserves year after year. So again, it's not externally visible yet, but we're working on that. But good things are happening. And again, that having the numbers for May less than 2 weeks into June with this level of detail is unprecedented. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. Something else that is a reason for optimism is, again, without going into too many details, not counting chickens before they hatch and whatnot, I will say the MD search is going well. We've had a number of good interviews with multiple candidates, and I don't want to say anything more than that, except that hopefully we will have a new MD before too terribly long. I mean, when we went into this process, we knew that the goal was to find the right person and not just rush in and grab the first person that we could. And the board is more than willing to do that. We are managing, we are splitting up the responsibilities and keeping everything rolling as best we can. So we are in a position that we are not being forced to take a candidate through desperation, basically. But the actual hiring process, I think, has gone well, and I think we've had a number of very promising interviews. So hopefully, like I said, more to say there in the future, but good news is hopefully coming. Something that I can talk about, I'm not personally involved with this, but I've heard this is secondhand from Frank Rizzi, who is the head of the audit committee, which the bylaws spell out that the managing director, generally speaking, is in charge of approving expenses. Lacking a managing director, that responsibility falls to the chair of the audit committee, which currently is Frank. And so Frank is in charge of both approving expenses, but also revising the policies. So, for example, the two main ones that I'm aware of that I've been told are substantial changes are any employee travel for anything other than going to a USPSA Nationals now requires pre-approval, and that all expenses by employees or staff at a match have to be submitted within 30 days of the event if you want to be reimbursed. And so basically, I don't know if the previous policy was 90 days or by the end of the year. Whatever it was overly broad and vague. And so 30 days is the cutoff at this point, and that's just so that we can close the books on an event, not in the month that the event happened. That would be ideal, but at least by the end of the following month, we can know everything that was expensed, for a given nationals, or if there was, some trade show or some, a SHOT Show type thing. If the SHOT Show was the middle of January, then by the end of February, we know what all the expenses are, and we're not going to get receipts rolling in months later. Not that in that particular case with SHOT Show, I'm aware of anything like that happening. Just an example. So in terms of establishing more substantial controls, and I mean, 30 days is plenty generous. I think anybody who's done any business travel, you try and get that stuff filed as soon as possible, or you're going to forget it, or I've had the receipt go through the wash in the pants, and then you can't, you can't claim that one. So yeah, and anyone who's done this, getting them filed as quickly as possible is a good thing. And I think for the regulars, I think for the employees, that's not a huge hurdle. I think for the volunteers, it's something where people tend to be tired. Maybe they have a long drive back from nationals, and it tends to be something where it's okay, I'll get to it. But, yes, staff at a nationals, they are volunteers, but if they want to be reimbursed, we have to set clear boundaries under which that can be done. So I think that is a positive step forward. Obviously, Carrier Optics Nationals is happening this weekend, and so this will be the first sort of trial run or first instance where this will be really in effect, but I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. So that's Frank in his role as chair of the audit committee. Frank and I are so Frank is the chair, I'm the vice chair of the bylaws committee, and we have now convened the other 3 members that were nominated and approved by the board. And we've had a meeting and been putting together our collective list of things that we would like to see changed within the bylaws. Some of them are very big, some are relatively small. And we will be submitting a few of those changes to be included with the agenda that's published Friday, the day that you're hearing this, which is 10 days before the actual meeting itself. And that 10 days is the amount of time that we have to publish the agenda before the meeting, as well as the bylaws say that you can either notify the board that you plan to make a bylaw change at the next meeting. So you say at one meeting, you give notice of intent to change it, or you can put the exact text of the change you wish to make out with with the agenda 10 days ahead of time and then vote on it. So given that at the last meeting, we were not ready to we were not in a position to basically commit to which changes we wanted to make, that'll be going out with the agenda the day that you hear this. So by the time you're listening to this, it should be posted. So we are taking the approach, I've seen a lot of comments about, we just need to wipe away the bylaws and start with a fresh set. Maybe that would be the way to do it. I come from a software background where virtually every attempt to take a working set of software and just rewrite it from the ground up ends up taking 3 times as long as you expect, and it's still buggy, and it's a failed endeavor. So my inclination, and the other folks on the committee agreed, was to take an incremental approach. Start with some small things this month, and then just keep making proposed changes incrementally until we get to a set of bylaws that suit our needs. I will also say, as the chair of the discipline committee, we have not been consistently busy, but there have been a few matters that have been referred to us. One of them is the matter that ended up being put in front of the board, leading to the termination of a member's membership based on a pattern of cheating at a number of different matches at a number of different clubs over, I think it was 6 or 8 months. I'd have to look back at my notes. So that was obviously the most sort of substantial matter that we've investigated so far, but there have been other ones that have resulted in various outcomes. When we do look into something, the board is given a report, and at the end of the day, it is ultimately up to the board to choose whether to take action. All the committee does is investigate and provide a recommendation. And so if you want to blame something on the discipline committee, at the end of the day, all we're doing is gathering the information, presenting it to the board, and then the board chooses what action to take based on that. And I will say the background. So currently the committee is composed of myself and 2 others, Tyler Turner from Georgia and Tim Hitchak from Virginia. And they are both much more qualified than I am in terms of actually doing the investigations, taking interviews, doing that actual process. And that was the reason I wanted those guys on the committee. They both have a background in these kinds of things. And so I knew that I did not want to be in the position of trying to make this up as I went along. And so that's the reason I pulled those guys in, and they've agreed to help out, and they've been a great deal of help in that process. So it's not just me sitting by myself just making things up. I have enlisted guys that understand this better than I do, and I listen to them when they give me advice. And I will say, so far, everything that we have worked on this year, so I think it was March, maybe, I'd have to go back and look at the minutes when I actually nominated them and had them approved. Everything that we've been in charge of investigating are events that have happened this year. So we have not been involved with any investigations of things before 2024, including anything at any nationals. That has not been in our purview. We are just addressing things that have been brought to us in the current day. If something historical was brought to us and referred to the committee for investigation, we might, but so far that has not been the case. So all of that to say that the various committees are finding their niche, establishing their patterns, and with it is also worth noting that with the election and seating of Alex Acosta, the new Area 4, we are now in a position where every current member of the board, so it's the end of June right now, so from July until the end of the year, we have 6 months where there will be no expected board turnover. So unless somebody resigns unexpectedly for some reason, everybody else will be serving through the end of the year. Now, perhaps Area 2 or Area 5, both of those elections are contested this year. They're being, new candidates are being elected. Conceivably, if one of those two sitting candidates was in a position to want to go ahead and resign and let their successor be appointed early, that's possible, but I don't know if I see that actually happening. So that's really the only thing that's on the radar. So it is, as you can imagine, it has been a sort of high turnover time, and there's been a sort of a short timer element with some of the folks that have been on the board as interims, where we weren't really sure, are they going to be here for the long term? And so, for example, one of the things I plan to bring up at this month's board meeting, if it's not already on the agenda, is readjusting the committees, the committee assignments. So in the case of a number of the interim directors, so for example, Area 1, Jim Boone, he won his special election to keep his seat, but it wasn't clear whether he would be on the board for the rest of the year. And so for some of the committees, some of the interims or the newly joined members have not been assigned to committees, so we have some room to rebalance those things now that we actually have a board that will be stable for hopefully a period of 6 months, and we'll have the chance to kind of work together, understand how to get things done, instead of having people, new folks coming in all the time and reading them in. And to some degree that turnover is inevitable. We'll never have the same board for multiple years in a row, but it's been especially acute this year. And so I think the fact that things have stabilized is something that we'll start to see the gains from over the remainder of the year. We've also been discussing how to improve the handoff when one board member comes in and the other leaves. In the case of the Area 4 election, we did vote to keep Ken Cobb's email access around for a 1-week overlap, just so Alex, the incoming area director, and Ken could try and coordinate and basically do a little bit of knowledge sharing. There are discussions about how we want to improve that even further for the next board handover. Nothing permanent yet, because obviously we have until the end of the year to really do anything, assuming, again, nobody resigns early. My personal thought would be, as soon as someone has won their election, they should be in every meeting, even in executive sessions, as a non-voting member until their term starts. If it is a 100% guaranteed thing that this person has won the election and they are going to be on the board, I can't think of any possible reason that you wouldn't want them at least in the room if they want to be, if they have the availability to join and be present for all the meetings leading up to their term starting. I can understand when you have multiple candidates, it'd be a bit cumbersome to have all of them there, but once the members have spoken and someone has gotten the nod, that's it. It's go time. It should be a gradual handoff to the point where the actual December 31st, January 1st handoff from the old director to the new one is fairly seamless, because hopefully they're working together, they're communicating. It's not this system where basically, all right, the last guy leaves on Friday, turns out the lights, the new guy comes in on Monday, and where is everything? That is something that I think has definitely set the board back, and that is something that we are talking about fixing now. Obviously, that's more of a 6-month medium-term thing, but that is something that we are looking at addressing, and it's something the board is taking seriously. And the board is also taking communication seriously. We are aware that we are not doing a very good job of communicating good news as and when it happens. There hasn't been a ton of it to communicate, but for example, with things like trying to be proactive with using this Caryoptics members meeting to put out a financial update, and I think we're all looking at the end of June. Once we have the June numbers, that'll be 6 months out of the 12-month year. That'll kind of give us a half-year picture to look at. Obviously, we'll only have one of the 3 nationals mostly completed financially by then. But that's kind of the next milestone that we're looking for in terms of giving an update after this one at the Caryoptics Nationals. But the board is aware. We talk about it internally about how we can do a better job of communicating. I don't know that there's nothing has been decided. Obviously, I have my podcast. Andy Erickson has his podcast, but we don't want to turn those into the official podcast. This is always this is going to be Ben Berry's view on things, which has its upsides and its benefits. I can say what I think, not necessarily what the board is going to do, but what I think the board should do, and that's just my opinion. Potentially, it could have its downfall as well because I'm just speaking from what I know, and I don't know the ins and outs of every committee and what every person is doing. I just hear what they tell me and what I see on emails. So it has its ups and downs, and that's something that we're very cognizant about, is that putting out any kind of official communication, you sort of lose that plausible deniability element where if I say something that's not correct, well, I was just wrong. I'm one person. I don't know everything. I try my best to be correct in everything that I say. But if I say something that's wrong, then it's just wrong. But if we start putting out, official pronouncements, those are taken very heavily. And we're trying to give that the weight that it deserves. So we are definitely not in the camp of just, lock the doors and keep the members outside and, shut them up and just get them to be quiet and keep shooting. That is not my attitude. That is not the attitude of, I would say, the majority of the board. And so the only question is, how do we improve things? And it is an ongoing discussion. It is something that we want to improve and will be improving in the months to come. So that is on the radar. Well, that wraps up this episode of Short Course. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is ben@berryshooting.com. Talk to you next time.